Consortium on Climate and Health Education at Columbia University. And this webinar is a series of monthly sessions where we have the objectives to equip health professionals with hands-on techniques, leadership strategies, and teaching tools for promoting climate and action in different settings. This is an initiative between the Columbia University, GCCHE, the EarthMedic, EarthNurse, and the University of West Indies. So today, our learning objectives is to learn key tips to craft a persuasive grant proposal by clearly defining the project goals, methods, and expected outcomes. We will also identify common mistakes in grant writing and how to align proposal with funders' priorities. We will learn about the theory of change to plan projects effectively and strengthen grant applications, and we will traditional and non-traditional source for climate and health initiatives in the Caribbean. So this session will offer 1 CME credit for CARICOM participants. If you are interested to get it, you need to fill out the survey that will be shared at the end of this session in the chat. And today we have the honor to receive these distinguished speakers here. We will have today Dr. James or Roberts-Nkrumah, and I will call first Dr. James Hospedales, who is a citizen on Trinidad and Tobago, a lover of nature, a person of faith, a father and a grandfather with 30 years of experience in public health in the Caribbean, in USA and UK. In 2020, he founded the EarthMedic and EarthNurse Foundation for Planetary Health to mobilize health professionals worldwide to address climate crisis through training, research, advocacy, and partnerships. He has served as an executive director of Caribbean Public Health Agency in 2013 to 2019, as also as a coordinator of chronic disease prevention and control at PAHO between 2006 and 2012, and the director of the Caribbean Epidemiology Center between 1988 and 2005. In those roles, he was successful in winning grants to extend the range and impact of public health programs, and he has published more than 1,100 papers and reports and writes for the G7 and G20 on climate and health. Almost 4,000, right? Thank you so much, James Hospedales. Dr. James, please, you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniele. Good evening, everyone. Buenas tardes. Bonsoir. Let me share the presentation. Where's the share button? Here we go. So I'm going to talk about mobilizing resources for climate and health. So I'm giving a broader sort of presentation. Once I get it, is that showing?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm going to talk more broadly about mobilizing resources for climate and health based on the experiences I've had in different organizations. And subsequently, you're going to be hearing more about focus on research funding from Georgiana, and then Laura is going to be talking more about how does the commercial world, the business sector view funding for in this area. And I should say, this experience I will describe was based on my role in a public international organization, CAREC or PAHO or CARFA. Now that I have an NGO hat on, civil society hat, as head of EarthMedic and EarthNurse, there are different challenges in mobilizing resources. So good evening, everybody, again. So I'm going to talk about, a few words on why you actually try to win a grant. It may seem obvious, but a few words on that and the different kinds of resources that exist. Grants and grant money is one kind, which is the main focus. And most of my talk is around what I call 10 steps to successful resource mobilization. And I'll say a few words about the results of that and the risks that are associated with mobilizing resources, and then a conclusion. So why do this? Why spend time and effort mobilizing resources for climate and health? Well, it may be that you don't have enough funding to meet your commitments. You want to extend the range and impact of what you're already doing. Add value to your members if you're an NGO or you're an international organization. And for many people, it's the financial reality. You just don't have the resources to do what you want to do. Mobilizing resources, getting grants allows the implementation of new projects, research and development, of course, which is a big thrust of this initiative. And you develop partnerships with funders who, if you do things well, they may continue to fund you. And although we're focused a lot on financial resources and grants, there are other ways to think of resources, even in finances. Most people are in an organization that have some sort of budget. We're not talking about loans on this time. Maybe you could do something that generates income or receive a gift. So these are all different ways of financial resources. Information sources or information products are a type of resource. Political support for your program or a project is a resource you often need in order to get the grant. And of course, human resources. You've got to be able to show a funder that the team you have, that the experience that you have is going to be able to deliver the grant that you're applying for. So all of these are, broadly speaking, are resources: financial, information, support, and human resources. Now, these are my 10 steps. There are others who have written things about this. This is what I dreamt up or felt on reflection of my experience of 20 or so years. And the first step is deliver well on what you already have. Before you even write a new grant, promoting the donor partner, developing a plan for your program, your department, your organization. Understanding the funder priorities is important before you put pen to paper, and involving more people, networking in the process. And then somewhere about here is actually writing the grant, learning the process. And once you've written it, marketing it, sell. I call that, if you believe in what you're doing. There's often a negotiation phase, and a lot can happen there or not happen. And the importance of the role of partners. And if you're really successful at this and you end up with several different funding partners, you may need a mechanism for coordinating them all. So these are what I call the 10 steps. So I'm going to go into each one of these now a little bit more and give some reflections. So deliver well on existing projects or grants. Most people have a budget, or you already have some grant. So strive to complete it within the deadline and the budget. Develop a track record for spending. When folks are going to fund you, they often want to know that you can spend what you're going to get from them. Meet the reporting requirements. There's often going to be some form to fill in every 6 months, every 3 months. Try to keep it as infrequent as possible so that doesn't burden you. And all of this builds credibility. So if you deliver well on what you already have, there's a good chance you'll be able to win another grant. Promoting the partner. If you do that, there's a good chance they might fund you again. So that can be done in a variety of ways, in workshops and training activities, in publications, in the press. A donor does not like to see a write-up about their project and there's no attribution of who funded it. Some of them will have this in the agreement they sign with you, that you must indicate what was the source of funding. Of course, people like speeches and photo ops, a chance to promote who has funded you. with your members of your NGO or your members in your department and other stakeholders with an embassy, if the funding has come from a foreign government, and with your own team, with your own staff. These are all ways to promote the financial partners. I should say a lot of my experience has been with development funding, actually less with research funding, which we're going to hear a bit more about from another speaker. Step number 3 is the analysis of the health and environment situation, the climate and health situation. What are the opportunities? What are the threats? What comparative advantages do you have? Who are some of the potential partners? Making a plan for your project or your program helps ensure funding you seek is congruent with the organization's needs, and it strengthens your position. If you have a plan to talk to someone about, then you're able to say, what we're seeking from you fits this way into our plan. The importance of participatory project development is getting different actors involved in it. Involvement is the best form of marketing. If those who you're thinking are going to be part of implementing or using the results of what you're doing, get them involved from the get-go. A lot of things can be valuable in justifying your proposal or your grant. The Paris Agreement on climate change. There's a Caribbean Corporation and Health framework if you're coming from the health sector. It's a bit dated now, but that has environment and climate in it as one of the priorities. The SDGs, of course, number 3 is health, number 13 is climate, number 17 is partnership. Your national plans, your Health National Action Plan for Climate, Power Hose Plan, and I have to give a shout out to this document, which I've highlighted, the Action Research Agenda for Climate and Health in the Caribbean. This was the last gathering of the planning for the Caribbean Corporation in Health. I think I recognize several people there. Some have changed jobs, some look a lot older. So this was 7 or 8 years ago, and it really needs to be updated. This is the 4th iteration of the CCH. And I give a big shout out to this document, the Research for Action on Climate Change and Health in the Caribbean Agenda. This really sets out in a whole range of areas what's happening now, what needs to happen, and where are we short on data? What do we need to know? So if the project or the grant you're writing or thinking of is to do with research and creating knowledge, this is a key document for you to check. And it's available online from EarthMedic, PAHO, Yale University, who are all partners in this. Step number 4 is understanding the priorities of the partners that you're thinking about. And they vary. Reducing poverty and inequity is often a big one for many development aid agencies. And if you can show that your climate problems are going to worsen poverty and inequity, that's how you get a hook into that. Because they may not be financing climate and health, but you can show that what you're going to do is going to tackle poverty and inequity. Tourism, trade, economic development, many funders are looking at those. So again, if you could show that your work in climate, right now we're working as EarthMedic on a project in Trinidad, an adaptation project to protect an area from flooding, and that's going to help local farmers. So you're going to be helping economic development in the area, and so on. You see the sorts of things here that are often priorities with different entities, gender and human rights. Of course, some have climate change nowadays more squarely as an explicit thing that they're funding. Some funders want to fund training in human resource development. Some specifically are research funders, and Georgiana is going to talk a bit more about that. PPPs, public-private partnerships. Some funders like to see those built. A question is often asked about sustainability, institutional strengthening. So this piece is background research and networking and talking to understand what different partners are interested in funding. And this is a summary from one of my phases of looking at the financial partner and what are their interests. So the development banks, Inter-American Development Bank, Caribbean Development Bank, are going to be more interested in economic development, and whatever you do is driving towards that. The development aid agencies, USAID, well, they're not such an actor anymore, but the Brits, the European, they're going to be poverty reduction and so on will be their focus. So you see the kind of the private sector is interested in profitability, interested in quality, image, and we'll hear a bit more about that later on. Step number 5 is it's not only, if you're the director of a unit, it's not only the director who's responsible. Delegate that responsibility to other members of the team to listen for what might be out there and to pool intelligence. And I say avoid a scarcity mentality. That means don't think, oh, well, if I tell anybody about this, they'll get it and I won't. If we create a different approach, then you get a rising tide that can lift all boats. So don't hold on to your information, pool the intelligence about financial partner interests. The process, understanding the process, this is really around the writing of the negotiation of the grant. The log frame is an important logical framework. That's the near universal language of funders. And this is where your theory of change really comes out. If I do this and that happens, then this will change. If and then. In the budgeting, make sure the costs are identified. Think about the counterpart funds. What are you putting into it in cash, or often it's in kind? And what are the management arrangements for the grant that you're working on? The devil is often in the details. Documentation, following the donor guidelines, the funding partner guidelines. I've sat on funding committees, and it's most annoying when you get a grant application and they have not followed the guidelines. It doesn't set the person who's requesting up very well. Be aware that it can take time. It can be years. I found that the fastest funders typically are the private sector. Within weeks to months, you could get funding for something once you've done all the homework. Others take 6 months to a year, others a year to 2. The European Union are found to be the slowest, but they often give the most money, billions and billions of dollars. So the time scale can be, you have to be patient sometimes in this game. Sell. If you really believe in your project and the thing you're looking for the grant, promoting it in different places, promote a vision bigger than yourself, but your role in realizing this vision. If the subject might be of interest to several different partners, perhaps call a meeting of them all and say, listen, I think I've got the best thing. Why don't you all join together and fund it? Attending key meetings so you're visible, lobbying different people and ministers and to the members of your team to get the buy-in. So those are some of the tricks to the marketing and promoting of your grant idea. And again, I say avoid a scarcity mentality. Very often, if you've made progress, you're going to be entering a negotiation. And there you have to be clear on what are you interested in, have a good sight of what the funders' interests are in, and it often is written down what their interests are. And you look for ways to say, what I'm proposing is going to advance what you want to, what you announce in your call for proposals, and think about the criteria for judging. Often there are sticking points. If you've got a multi-partner grant that you're going after, who's going to handle the money? Who is the recipient? The staffing that you might require, often that's a sticking point. Overhead costs. Some donors, funders don't like to give much overhead, so that might take negotiation. Whose rules and regulations apply? Sometimes the rules that they may wish to impose are onerous. The reporting, technical and financial, and issues around audit and sustainability. These are things that will often come up for discussion. Teamwork with your colleagues, with other stakeholders. Again, making use of the mandates or resolutions of countries and working with government, NGOs, academia, or other international partners to secure the grant. If They were very successful, and there were phases in my career where we were very successful in winning grants. Then we sometimes created a multi interagency meeting or multi-partner program. For example, with HIV and AIDS, I recall having 6 or 7 funding partners coming together around a common plan, or else you go crazy trying to work bilaterally with 5 or 6 or 7 different parties. And these are the reasons why it enhances resources and you reduce the potential for conflicts. You may reduce your administrative burden, and you could consider a unit for coordination. So those are my 10 steps. And then to close off, had a lot of good results from this approach, and increased partners and increased resources and ability to increase the relevance to our countries, allowed starting up of new programs, and improved financial health. Some of the risks: you can overwhelm your absorptive capacity, especially if you go after more than one project or grant and you actually get them, then you have to deliver. And so this is something to be aware of. It's better to, as they say, under-promise and over-deliver rather than over-promise and under-deliver. So you can put a lot of pressure on your core resources. If you win grants, you can distort your priorities. Staff hired onto the project may have an allegiance to who's funding and not to the organization. There can be conflicts of interest. You can end up fragmenting what you're doing. And you can have multiple reports for similar activities to different, to your, whatever your governance mechanism is, to the financial partner, to members. So these are some of the risks of success with winning grants. You may think, well, Doc, I'm not there yet. I haven't gotten the first grant. I hear you. My job is to say, here are some of the risks when you're too successful. So in conclusion, I think mobilizing resources to address climate and health is essential, and there's a lot of scope for success. Over the last 4 or 5 years, there's much more resources now available than there are good projects. And hopefully all the training we've been doing, the networking will allow us to craft better projects. You need to exercise vision, understand that process, and be systematic. You can learn this and become good at resource mobilization and winning grants. Participatory planning, teamwork, networking are all part of the process, and being aware of some of the risks and having a plan to combat those hazards. The last thing I put here is policy and partnership. Not all funders are desirable. You need to be thinking of who you're going to ask for funds, and is there a conflict of interest. For example, I'll be very direct. I would not recommend going to a fossil fuel company for a grant on climate and health. That's a conflict of interest. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back over to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. James. Very, very interesting. All these tips on how to make your grant proposal more relevant to the local context, to the regional context, and maybe to the global context, and how we can make it more secure. Even when we can write in a way that can pass more liability and more certainty that this is going to happen. So I'm going to pass to our next presenter, and if you have any questions to Dr. James Hospedales, please include in the Q&A session. I'm going to call now Dr. Georgiana Gordon-Strachan, who holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of West Indies and a master's degree in health policy planning and financing from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine at the University of London. She is the director of the Tropical Metabolism Research Unit at the Caribbean Institute for Health Research, University of West Indies, and she's also the executive director of the Lancet Countdown's Health and Climate Change Regional Center for Small Island Developing States. She has received a Vice Chancellor Awards for Excellence in Research. Thanks so much, Dr. Georgiana, to be here with us. you can start your presentation. I can hear you, and I can.
I was trying to unmute. Thank you so much, Daniele, and thanks to everybody who has joined. And James did a really good job of taking us through most of the things around grants. So I'm going to try to not be repetitive. So my presentation is going to just give you some tips and some hints on how to write your grant in a successful way. So so one of my previous jobs was I was the head of the Mona Office for Research and Innovation at the University of the West Indies in Mona, Kingston, Jamaica. And part of my role was we operated as a research office. So many of the research grants that were prepared and submitted by members of our faculty had to go through our office. So I'm starting by apologizing to the people whose proposals are mentioned here. And it is not intended to put them down or anything. It's just to serve as a teaching tool. I've tried really hard to anonymize them, but just in case. So I'm not going to present on how to search for grants, as you already know that. And if you don't know how to use that, you can use AI. Okay? And this was just an AI search that I did on ChatGPT. I put in the terms climate change, health grants, and I asked for the websites. And it came up with 10, very quickly came up with 10. So you can use existing tools to find research grants. So I'm going to talk about how to prepare, right? So one of the things that you have to do is to prepare to receive your grant. So a big part of your thing is preparation to receive your grant. And the preparation actually starts long before the grant call. And the preparation has two components. One is the individual component, and the other is the institutional component. From the individual side, you need to define what your research interest is. Right? So you need to think about, what do I really want to use my time studying about? What do I really want to contribute to the general body of science and knowledge? And you need to familiarize yourself with that specific research interest. In doing that, you need to figure out what is written. Are there any local experts? Who are the gurus? What have they said? And the most important thing that you would want to know is, what are the gaps that need to be filled? Where are the areas that need to be fixed and to be made better? The other thing that we really need to do is, you don't have to, but it always helps if you build partnerships, right? So when you do it alone, it's very lonely, and you don't have a chance to interact with other researchers or interact with other people who may have a better idea of how to do this than you do. So it's always good to build partnerships. And most grants are based on partnerships and collaborations. Now, how do you do that? One way to do it is to do a targeted outreach, right? So I asked you before, who are the gurus? You make friends with these gurus. And in this day and age with social media, it's so easy to connect with other people. There are several different scientific and research platforms that you can join, like LinkedIn, ResearchGate, academia, and other professional associations, which I'm sure most of you are already on. And try to engage these people in conversation. If they have blogs, you can check out their blogs. If there is a community of practice that they're a part of, you can join this community of practice, but try to get yourself in the loop so that you are aware of what the current thinking is, what are the challenges, how are they being addressed. And in that way, you are able to share your ideas and seek opinions and also guidance. Now, in part of the preparation for doing your grant is, when the grant reviewer looks at your proposal, one of the things they try to assess is, how much experience do you have in what you're trying to do? Because remember now, they're trying to give you some money to do the work. So they want to make sure that you are actually able to do the work. So one trick is to try to write publications, write papers, sometimes with the partners that you make through your building of partnerships. But if you write a few publications around the area that you want to research, then it shows that you have some expertise in the area. And this doesn't mean that you have to write papers that are of original research. You can do things like systematic reviews, you can write commentaries, you can write short reports, and so on. Ideally, obviously, is to have original research, but if you don't, build out your CV with publications. And while you're writing your grant, it's always nice to be able to cite your work throughout the grant application. Also, at the individual level, just to remind you that ideas come in very weird ways and in serendipitous ways. So I'm going to tell you this story, and I'm going to be really quick with it. And it's a story about a drug called Canasol. And Canasol is a drug that is used to treat glaucoma, and it is made from an extract of cannabis. So there's a pharmacologist in Jamaica who used to like to go fishing. So he went fishing with some of his colleagues, and his colleagues were Rastafarians. And if you know anything about Rastafarians, smoking marijuana is part of their culture. So they looked out and saw some ships coming in the harbor, and he could not see these ships coming in the harbor. And they were like, can't you see it? It's right there. They're right there. He couldn't see it. Eventually, the ships came in closely enough for him to see them. And it gave him an idea. It gave him the idea that clearly from smoking the marijuana, it made your vision more acute. So he went away, went to his lab, and voila, he was able to extract an active ingredient that helped with treating glaucoma. So I'm telling you this story because these ideas come from places that you don't expect them to. So pay attention. All right. So one of the things that you should also do is, if you're going to be doing the research within your own university, within your own laboratory, within your own setting, it's always good to do an assessment of what you have available and what resources you may need. And in doing this assessment, you are able to do kind of an inventory of where are the expertise, what equipment is there, what is the profile of the population. So you could do something like an epidemiological profile of the population that you're looking at, what services are offered. If you're doing something in clinical care, you might want to know what services are offered. But if you're doing something with climate, you also may want to know about whether or not the meteorological offices have weather stations, where these weather stations are, how often do they collect the data, what is the data, what does the data look like? And also, one important thing is also what kind of infrastructure are you going to be working within? So if there are legal and operating frameworks that you have to comply with, such as data protection acts or data protection frameworks, you need to be aware of what these are. So you start exploring processes and mechanisms also for getting access to information or data. If you're doing something with patients and you want to do a retrospective report looking at patient records, then you need to have access to these databases. Bear in mind that in some situations, it may not be in an electronic format. So again, prepare to receive your funding. One thing that is often required is certification, and certification may come in the form of good clinical practice training for those of you who are clinicians. But if you're going to be doing research on human subjects or on animal subjects, you may need ethical approval, and you may also need, the grant agency may require that you show that you have been trained in research on human and animal subjects. So go ahead and do those ethics research training programs that are online and for free. The other thing that needs to be up to date is your curriculum vitae, or some call it your resume. And if you're going for certain grants, they require that your CV be presented in a particular format. So do not wait for the call to prepare and update. Go ahead and prepare and update. For the NIH, you will need to do a biosketch. For some granting agencies, you need to be validated by your institution and you need to be registered on these platforms. So make sure to check that out. Then you go, now that you know what you want to study about, what you want to research, you can go ahead and look in a more targeted way for funding. Now, I told you that one level was individual and the other was institution. From the institution perspective, you cannot do this without your research office. You need to make allies with people who work there. Find out if the institution needs to be registered on these platforms, these funding platforms, and if they do, go ahead and get those things done early, okay? Now, in most situations, the submission of the document of your proposal is done by you, but it's validated by your research office. And so you want to make sure that they're aware of the fact that you're about to submit so that they can go in afterwards and do the final validation. If they do not do that, then your proposal would not be properly submitted and would not reach the point of being a reviewer. I have a story on that, and I'm not going to be able to tell you because we're running out of time and I'm going really quickly. Suffice it to say, nobody knew that this person was submitting, and at the middle of the night was when a call was made to say, can you go online to validate my proposal? Please communicate, please communicate. Okay, the other aspect of it is something that James spoke about, which is the fiscal prudence and the fiduciary management. And that is a big part of the decision that is taken by a funding institution. They want to make sure that your institution has the capacity to manage an external grant. So you need to find out whether they've done it in the past and at what level. I'm sure most of you, you have a research office and your university has had several grants, so it's easy to find someone in other places which may not be as well resourced. You may need to communicate with somebody else or partner with somebody else around getting this grant. Now, this is very important because many good grant applications are not funded because the funders are not convinced that the institution is capable of managing the funding. On the institutional level, as I said before, sometimes clearances are needed. And so you need to know what is the policy for getting your documents cleared. Many grants require a letter of support, and the letter of support may come from, like, for example, a government agency. It will come from your university that says, yes, we are in full support of this proposal and we will allow time for this particular employee to carry out this work. Most times, these documents have to be signed by a legal officer that is authorized or by the university to sign on their behalf. Now, if you are in an institution which has where you need a legal officer to sign, you cannot go at the last minute to ask the legal officer to sign off on your document. Usually there is a time frame that is allotted, and you must get your documents to the legal officer within that time frame, because the legal officer or the signing officer needs to do due diligence, needs to look at your proposal and needs to make sure that the university or the institution is in agreement and alignment with what you're trying to do. All right, so finally you see the grant call. Now the grant call usually is to address a particular problem. So you ask yourself, can I address this problem? Is this problem something that I can address? If I can address it, who are the people who will work with me to address this problem? So what is my project team? What are the skill mixes that I need? Do I need an anthropologist? Do I need an urban planner? Do I need a climate change specialist? And then you start to think about how you will build out your project team. Now, it's great if your project team if you already had made partners and partnerships so that you can pull on those existing networks and partnerships. The technical content is important. It has to be sound, and you have to try to address all the questions that are part of the grant call. Your method must be good and must be able to answer the objective that you are trying to achieve. And again, as James said, your budget needs to be realistic. And again, with the submission process, I just want to make this point that you have to make sure that you have all the clearances that you need. Now, for me, the most important thing is that your research proposal matches what the funder wants. So you have to spend time to understand the call, read the guidelines through, read them through again. If there is a webinar around the grant call, attend the webinar, watch the video again. If there is a grant officer from the funding agency that is responsible for this grant call, contact that person, have a conversation with that person, get feedback from that person, and let them help you to craft your proposal in a way that it can be a winning proposal. Sometimes they will give you some back information that will tell you what led to the reason for this particular call for proposals to come in. That's nice to know, because then in your background, you can build on what the issues were. Now, understand the language of the call. So for example, if it is a call that says, we would like you to do implementation science, go and find out what implementation science is, what it entails. Don't assume that because you're implementing a program, then your proposal automatically falls into and qualifies for an implementation science grant. I'm sure most of you already know this, but always look at the technical information, understand the language of the call, and what does that mean in the context of the proposal that you have in mind. Now, reviewers like when they get interesting proposals. So if you can think outside of the box, if you can be a bit innovative, it always helps to make your proposal more attractive. And also make sure that your team has demonstrated the competence that's required. I'm going to talk about cost very, very quickly. There are two types of costs, mostly in a budget, and they're the direct costs and the indirect costs. So the direct costs are those that can be attached to or assigned to the research proposal. So things like salaries, equipment, computer programs, and so on. The indirect costs are those that cannot be directly assigned to the research proposal. So for example, things like electricity, costs for security, the library cost, and things like that. So because those are shared costs, they cannot be assigned directly to the project, but there is a cost. So that's how you include your indirect cost. So most institutions have a rate, an indirect cost rate. So you find out from your institution, what is the rate of my indirect cost, and you apply that to your budget. All right, so the grant call usually has specific headings or subheadings, and the first one usually is eligibility. Look at the eligibility criteria, try to ensure that you meet these eligibility criteria. If you do not waste your time, your proposal will get kicked back. Are there budgetary restrictions? In other words, are there things that the funder will allow or will pay for, and things that they will not pay for? Always look out for those budgetary restrictions. Limitations to direct or indirect costs. So that again, what will they pay for? What will they not pay for? And in other words, find out what are the allowable funding limits. If it is a proposal that has a cost sharing requirement, you need to include that in your budget. And cost sharing means that if we are going to be doing this project together, you as a recipient of the grant will need to contribute to the overall cost of doing the research project. So your overall cost, your contribution may be things like office space, time, and so on. So you can figure out how to cost that out. And there are people who can help with costing that. Okay. So again, follow the details very meticulously. Beware of automated checks. One little story that I had, we were doing a project proposal and many people wrote different parts of it. And when we put it all together and then we were trying to submit it, in NIH, there is a red flag that comes back that says there's something wrong here. We could not figure out what it was that was wrong. And what was wrong was that one person had the font at 11.5 instead of 12, right? So you need to be, that's how specific you have to be, because if they give you 3 pages to write, you could write at font size 8 and get a lot more in than somebody who writes at font size 12. So they're just trying to make it fair. Also, make sure that you fill in all the relevant forms, okay? Because once the automated check runs the application, if the forms are not there, it will push it back. A word or two on the budget. The budget must be realistic. We said this before. And sometimes the budget has to have a justification, right? So you have to have a narrative that is reasonable, that says, this is a salary that we're going to be paying, and this is a reasonable salary because this is a salary of my institution, right? So the budget justification is sometimes a little bit tedious, but it is something that needs to be done. Another thing, one grant won't answer all your questions. Another story here, we got excited about a call that was on pain management, and we pulled together a whole research agenda and tried to put it in, and these were the words of the reviewers. Aspects of the proposal are good, however, the research is not focused. Consider focusing on these particular areas, and we got some ideas, okay? All right, where am I now? Okay, so I got some comments from funders when I was putting this proposal together. I took their names out because I didn't get to ask them before I did the slide. But one of the things was follow the instructions. One funder said that you have to make sure that the names and contact information on it is correct. And she told me a story about somebody writing a brilliant proposal, but they could never make contact because the email address was not right. They're also concerned about the composition of the team. We spoke about that before. We have to make sure that the team is fit for purpose and that the team has the competencies required for addressing the grant call. She also shared that she liked when other disciplines were involved because it made the proposal richer, because you're seeing different perspectives of the same problem and ways to address different perspectives of the same problem. Okay, she was very, very annoyed with repurposed grants, okay? I thought that repurposed grants were great because, you know, you just fix them and send them in. She did not like that. She said, if you repurpose an existing proposal, we can spot it a mile away. We can see that it's not original. So if you're going to be doing that, please be careful to make it relevant to the call that you are responding to. And then ensure that all the points to be addressed in the grant call are addressed. So the review process, the grant call usually tells you how the proposal will be assessed. And some grants actually give you a little bit of a rubric for evaluation. So they will tell you, we will assign a maximum of 10 points to this, a maximum of 2 points to that, a maximum of 5 points to that, and so on. Pay attention to the review criteria. Look to see where the points are allocated, the most points are allocated, and really make sure that you knock that part of it out of the park, right? So write that part really, really well. So for example, if there's a score for, let us say that it is a grant that wants to ensure continuity of the capacity, and it has a part where it wants to make sure that you are mentoring and building capacity, and there's a score for that, make sure that you have a component that addresses that particular thing. Now, understand the scoring. Now, for the NIH, last thing I'm going to say is that for the NIH, the higher that your score is, the worse your proposal is, okay? So we had a proposal where we got a good score and one person, well, a high score, and one person who wasn't familiar with the rubric said, how could they not fund our proposal? And we got such a high score, right? Understand the scoring. So for successful grants, prepare. Don't forget that the administrative requirements are very important. It is easy for a scientist or a researcher to write the technical component of the grant, but administrative aspects of it usually require the researcher to seek guidance from other people. So always remember that you need to have this part done in order for your proposal to be considered. If you are able to, it is always advisable to get independent review because that really helps to make your proposal better. So I'll close off with some take-home points. The first point was prepare to meet your grant. So start before you see a grant call. When you see the call, read the guidelines. Keep reading through throughout the process. Assemble a good team. If you can have local and international partnership, that also is quite acceptable. Develop a checklist with timelines and assign different people to different tasks. If you can meet frequently, do so. Make sure that your budget is realistic, because you don't want to write a project where you are unable to complete everything because your budget was just unrealistic. It was just too small. Or you don't want to write one where your budget is huge and you can't spend all the money. Grant agencies don't like it when you give money back. So always try to make your budget realistic. If you can submit before time, now you and I know that when you wait for the last minute, the last day and last hour to submit, everybody is submitting at the same time. And the system inevitably gives trouble, right? Either it crashes or so. So always try to submit before time or on time. And then one other thing, just to get back to the point that was made by the funder, where the name and the contact information was wrong, make sure that you get confirmation that your research was submitted. And this is usually in the form of an auto response, right? So make sure that you get that. If you submit and you don't get that, write to the grants officer and find out whether or not your proposal was actually submitted. And the final thing, as someone who has reviewed proposals for grants, be kind to the reviewer. And I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgiana. Such a valuable tips from the beginning to the preparation. We need to prepare, we need to have time to prepare the proposal and to follow all the steps and make sure that we have all the necessary requirements to apply. And so it's a lot of process that needs to be considered. And I will call our next speaker. Please, if you have any question, so put in the Q&A and enjoy that you have such amazing people here with such experience. So please, our next speaker, who has over 40 years of experience as a researcher and educator in the crop science, agronomy, and horticulture. Her qualification includes a bachelor and a PhD degree in agriculture, specializing in agronomy, a master's degree in education, a post-graduation diploma in management, and a certificate in horticultural therapy. She was a member of academic staff in the Department of Food Production, Faculty of Food and Agriculture, the University of West Indies. And from 2022 to 2025, Dr. Roberts chaired the Environment Committee of the First Citizen Foundation of the First and Tobago. In this position, she evaluated several applications from nonprofit and community-based organizations for funding environment-related projects. Great, you are mute. Please unmute your microphone. You are mute, Laura, Dr. Laura.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
My apologies for that. Yeah, my apologies for that. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Daniele, for your introduction. And let me just start at the beginning here. All right. So my contribution this evening will be to look particularly at what corporate entities look for in a grant proposal. Grant proposals that come to them. And I just want to touch on something that one of them actually said to me as I was putting this together, I basically drew on not only on my own experience, but I also drew on the experience of funders with whom I had not worked from the position of actually evaluating proposals, but applying for funding. One of the points that was made was that there's a difference between sponsorship and grants. And I want to touch on that. I will also go through the evaluation criteria that are most used by corporate entities, and some of them have already been dealt with by the previous presenters. And I would also want to share just some tips for enhancing your chances for a successful grant response. And again, we would have had some useful tips before. So let's get right into it. Now, usually, sponsorships are provided by entities, corporate entities, as a part of their CSR or corporate social responsibility activity. And that is something that you need to be mindful about. The sums of money provided are relatively small. They usually cover one-off events, like, for example, there may be a launch of some project, or there may be a day of celebration of some particular activity that the organization, the applicant has been involved with, or something like that. But it's a very short-term activity. They look for alignment with their philosophy, their vision and mission, so that whatever is being proposed has to be in alignment. It has to be compliant with that. And I think that has been mentioned before. Very important with a number of corporate sponsors is the issue of visibility and branding, opportunities for employee participation. And this is typical of situations in which the sponsorships are handled by the marketing and communication departments. Their business is promotion, right? Now, if there has been a good partnership, whatever it is, whatever activity is being proposed has worked well for the funder, it is likely that funding could be available for that activity on a repeated basis, year after year, because good press, good promotion is derived. Sponsorships are much less demanding in terms of what is required for the application process, as just outlined by Georgiana, and the reporting procedures. Grants, on the other hand, tend to be a part of the core function of organizations. So if you're dealing with a development bank, their core function is really to provide grants or provide loans, loans as one source of funding, but their business is to provide, financing to support development activities. And so normally what they provide is, or what they support is projects that align with broad development goals. The sums of money are fairly large, and therefore the application process is competitive. That's why there are calls for proposals. The project must closely align with the funding institution's philosophy, strategy, and strategic plans. Funding is provided for specific purposes, specific projects. There is very little leeway for using the funds allocated for anything else. And I remember Georgiana saying, make sure that you can spend whatever is allocated. If you have money left over, all right, It is not to be spent on anything else. That could ensure that you don't ever get another grant. The projects may be short to medium term, maybe 2 years, 3 years or more, but they are not normally repeated unless it is part of something that is ongoing. And it really depends on the nature of the project and whether the focus of the funding agency does not change over time. So research, capacity building, these are areas, and Georgiana touched there, so I will not go further. And as I said, the application process, the reporting procedures are usually rigorous. So with that in mind, you will see I will speak later to deciding on what really you are applying for. So let's look quickly at the criterion for evaluation of grant requests. Again, in my discussion with an agency that had worked, they received grants. This person was the head of that particular department receiving grants. The first thing they said that they look for is the legal status of the applicant. Only legally registered NGOs or community-based organizations or charities are considered. They do not usually fund individuals unless it is a commissioned work, like let's say it may be an artist, you know, or somebody like that who has a body of work or a reputation and has been commissioned for a specific assignment, right? Normally, they deal with organizations. Very interestingly, it's also mentioned that the applicant should not be in a country against which there are some sort of sanctions, either international sanctions or maybe sanctions between countries. So that is something to look out for. There should be information available on the applicant's information, history, you know, what their core functions are, and so on. What is the management structure? Who are the key personnel involved in this organization? Again, because checks are done on these individuals to see whether there is anything out there on the records in the database about individuals that can create a liability to working with the organization. All right? They also look for financial accountability. What is the financial status of this institution? Is it tax compliant? Where do they derive their funds? So, you know, James mentioned various sources, income generation, you know, loans and so on. That must be very clear. And audited statements should be available because they're interested in knowing with whom they are doing business. They themselves have to be compliant with international financial regulations. The reputation of the applicant is very important, and this was also mentioned before. There should be evidence of previously successfully completed projects. All right, testimonials even from previous funders. And it is always very useful if the applicant has worked with well-known, reputable agencies or institutions before, whether they have earned awards, these should also be indicated in the proposal. Another criterion that is looked at carefully is whether who is the community that is being served by this organization, and the extent to which that community is also common to the funder, and how familiar the applicant really is with that community. And this, of course, has to do with the relevance of the proposal, all right, and the impact that it will have. Now, with respect to criteria that are used to evaluate the institution itself, They look for compatibility between the applicant and the funding institution, right? Is there compatibility in vision, philosophy, mission, the nature of the business? And this should be available information, you know, a website or so should be able to provide that information. In other words, they should be able to find that independently, apart from it being stated in the proposal. They should be able to benefit from the whatever arrangement is being or project that is being proposed by alignment with the applicant's institution. All right. In other words, the proposal or project should be easily consistent, should be seen to be consistent with the strategic plan and work program of the organization. All right, it should dovetail nicely, you know, within what they're doing. They look for opportunities for strategic partnerships and alliances. This is a very important benefit. And so, unlike sponsorships, in which exclusivity might be a criterion, because they want to say, well, you know, I'm the only person or the only organization funding this so that my logo alone goes on it. With grant funding, strategic partnerships and alliances are important. And so the partner's reputation, all right, is very important. If you are choosing partners, make sure that they are partners that would enhance not only your reputation, but also the reputation of the funding agency. Branding, while not, you know, very, very important for funding agencies that fund development-related projects or research projects and so, it's not as important as for sponsorship. Nevertheless, acknowledgement of their contribution is required, all right? Unless maybe it is from some philanthropic organization and they do not wish to be publicly acknowledged, you know, it is taken for granted that acknowledgement should always be given. And this is seen even when you are making the application, because when mention is made of the previous grant applications that your organization might have been able to win, and you have to provide evidence, people will look for, you know, how that acknowledgement is done in those proposals. So as I said, while visibility, image profiling, participation of the employees may not be a prominent requirement, there must be willingness to follow the protocols for use of the logos, all right? And again, that is something that is observed in when they look at what you have done before. Now, with respect to the actual proposal, okay, or project, the need has to be very, very clearly established. And that need has to be established within a specific community that your organization addresses and the funding agency's organization is interested in. All right, so it could be at a community level, country level, regional level, but there should be evidence that of familiarity, all right, and that adequate research has been done. If you are saying that your project is going to be addressing livelihoods of women and youth and whatever it is, then there should be some figures on levels of unemployment and so on among this specific group. Alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and policies. The project should be clearly aligned. And again, not just the project, your organization itself should be aligned with these and should also align with the call that is being made. And it has been put out by the funding agency. Alignment also with government and other official policies. All right. Again, that was mentioned before, so that the project sits within a broader context. All right. And it is not just, something that just a very narrow focus without relevance to anything else. Project duration should be clearly stated. And that relates to other things that we will see. The goals must be very stately and aligned to the expressed need. The objectives themselves should be stated, aligned with the goals. They should be realistic and achievable within the project period that has been identified. Then the specific action or intervention, solution, should be relevant. It should address the objectives, the specific objectives that are to be met in order to address the need must be seen in the solution. The solution should also be sound. Whether it was already tested, it might have been a project. The project might have been one that we have been working on it. The applicant has been working on it for some time. And so they have been building up their methodology. And now they are seeking to expand what they are doing. It's a tested and tried methodology. And if it is innovative, why is this innovation necessary? And how is it better than, other approaches that have been used to resolving a similar problem? All right. And why will it work? Again, the evidence that sound research backs whatever is being proposed must be there. For the implementation of the solution, the applicant, either alone or with partners, must have the competence to execute, and there should also be evidence of engagement of the community that the solution or the intervention is meant to benefit. All right, and these have been mentioned before, so I will not go further, but they are very important. Now, the proposal, measurability is very important. What are the outcomes? If certain actions are taken, what are the outcomes to be expected from those actions? All right? And outcomes are really the short-term results. So, for example, if one says that you are going to train people, okay, now then what is the outcome? How many seminars or short courses or workshops, how many persons train? Okay, so, and I should just underline something that I believe both James and Georgiana mentioned. In identifying or in stating these expected outcomes, it is very important that you do not overstate. In other words, instead of saying we will train 100 young people between 16 and 30 years of age, it is better to say we will train at least 40 or 50. So if in fact you end up training 100, then you have overperformed. All right, but be realistic, because one of the things that you will have to ensure is that if you say you're going to train 100, then you must indeed be able to garner 100 persons to come to that course and finish it. All right. Risk awareness. This should be stated. All right. What are the risks that this project faces? All right. And what are the mitigation strategies to avert or minimize these risks, right? That should be upfront. And again, it shows that the project has been thoroughly thought through. Timelines, this was mentioned. Timelines for the various actions to be taken, for results to be seen, what provision is there for monitoring, evaluating, reporting, all right? That should be clearly set out. And sustainability. State how the impact will be sustained after the funding ends. As I mentioned before, grants don't normally continue. It's not like an every year, or as soon as they are finished, then it's automatically renewed. So the funding agency would be very interested in how this project will be able to sustain itself. All right. And in fact, there are sustainability standards 1 and 2, that, speak to this issue of identifying how the project will be able to continue after the grant period ends. Budget. It is always important to give an overall picture of what the financial requirements are for the project, whether funding is being sought for the entire project or a portion of this project. All right? And the source of funds for the different project components should be identified, including the applicant's input. And as Georgiana mentioned, whether that input is in cash or in kind, and particularly if it's in kind, a value should be put to it. All right? Now, specific to the aspect of the project for which the grant is being applied, include only those items that will be funded. Again, that has been spoken to before. There are some things that will not be funded. Some funders do not like to fund salaries. Okay, others look for persons who will be employed to ensure that the project is properly executed. So one has to know the requirements. Include all relevant items of expenditure to ensure that the project can really be executed properly. The prices provided should be up to date and realistic. There shouldn't be ballpark figures. There shouldn't be figures that you just pull out of the hat and everything just rounded to the nearest $1,000 or something like that. There's need to do the homework and get an understanding of what will it really cost. Provide for contingencies. All right, this is important to cover your risk. Was that mentioned, I think, by Georgiana again, where there are administrative costs, ensure that those are included. If you're part of an organization, a large organization, and that is relevant to you, make sure that those are included. And it is also useful to indicate phased expenditure where relevant, so that all of the money may not be required upfront. Okay, let's say maybe if you are purchasing equipment, that might be required. But if actions or the intervention is being rolled out in stages, then the funding would be required in stages, and it is useful to indicate that. So just the general tips now for success, a short list, and some of them you have heard before. The applicant should determine readiness for funding. What really is required? Is it that one requires maybe sponsorship or a grant? Is there the competence available to manage that grant? Okay. Research the funding agencies, right? Just as they want to know about the applicant, ensure that you understand who they are, what they fund, what's their history, what is required, and so on. All right, and then select appropriately. Maybe that call for proposal, when one reads it properly, it really does not fit the project that you have in mind. So you do not want to waste your time and theirs. Determine your requirement for a partner. There are a number of reasons why a partner may be required. For example, one may be looking at the expertise to perform certain aspects of the project. All right, maybe technical expertise, but it may also be something like having the setup to handle the financial reporting and that sort of thing, the administrative reporting. Maybe your organization doesn't have that, but another partner has that sort of thing. And so you may need a partner, but be very careful in selection of partners. that this is not just a marriage of convenience. You want to ensure that there will be teamwork, effective teamwork, that the partners are competent at what they do, they are reliable. It is critical because it will determine how well the project is implemented and the level of success achieved. If the funding agency provides templates, for example, for CVs, for the proposals and so on, it is important that those templates be reviewed thoroughly and understood, and that they should be used and completed according to the guidelines. I said, with grants, it's a competitive process. There are a number of responses to these call for proposals. And if for any reason your proposal does not comply with the requirements, it could just fall through the cracks, okay? And we heard just now, it could be even a matter of font size. So be guided accordingly. Demonstrate professionalism. The document should be properly edited and presented. And this is where, some independent reviewer, some independent editor, and so can also be very useful. And you also want to meet the submission deadlines. Okay, so I think this is what I wanted to present, and I thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laura. Very, very clear, all the tips that you gave, amazing. I would like to invite all the speakers now for our panel session so we can answer some questions. And if you have any questions, please include in the Q&A. Most of the sponsors today, they are requiring, for example, a letter of inquiry or a letter of interest. So what should be, and normally this letter is so short, like 1 page, 2 pages, and sometimes you have so many things that you want to put there. So what kind of information that you think that needs to be prioritized in this type of letters? And is it the institution background? Is it the partnership? Is it the outcomes? Is it the idea? So maybe I can start with Georgiana with this question.
All right. So do you want to simplify your question?
So in a letter of interest, what kind of information that we can prioritize, or maybe the structure, how people can present the idea, what can come in the beginning, and so take the attention of the reviewer, something like this.
All right, so one of the nice things that we have these days are data visualization and storytelling apps. And most proposals require a theory of change, which is a simple document that kind of tracks where the problem is and where you would like to, how would you like to see the problem fixed? So for example, let us say we're looking at something with climate change and climate refugees. And the problem is that it's a growing problem and we're having an increase in climate refugees. But what we would like to see is a situation where climate refugees are integrated into the new communities that they're in, that there are legal frameworks that will help them to assimilate, and also that there is something around mitigation and adaptation. So we can start with, this is a problem, and we can look at what we would like the solution, what we can try to visualize what we would like the solution to be. And once we do that, we work backwards to say, okay, what would we need to do? What are the activities that we need to do to achieve this particular change? And those types of frameworks, make it easy for your reviewer to have a quick look to see what your main goal is, for one, and two, what strategies are you going to use to try to ensure that you achieve this goal. So using visualization is always a good idea. Good visualization, though, not a complicated thing that nobody understands but you. So be very careful with the use of visualization. So that helps as well. I think I'd say that. I'm sure James and Dr. Roberts have also other suggestions, so I'll hand over to them.
Yes, we lost Daniele. Her internet went out. So James, we'll have you respond next, and then Laura, you can add your remarks.
Well, I'll tell you something that you don't want to see in a letter of interest. That is no letter of interest. I'm being facetious here. We're advertising a job at the moment of a communications intern, and people just send their CV. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. You should at least put some effort into writing a couple of paragraphs, why you want this effort, why you want this job, how it's aligned with your experience and your qualifications, how you're going to be able to help solve whatever the job is calling for. And so I think, yeah, a letter of application should be not one paragraph or 2 sentences. It shouldn't be 10 pages, maybe 1, maybe 2 pages. And indicates, why you're interested, why you, when I say you, I mean you or your organization, that you have a good solution, who's going to benefit from this, that you have good stakeholders, a good team, and good partners that's going to ensure delivery, and how it's going to advance the goal of whoever is trying to fund you. You should show alignment with what you're proposing to do with that organization's interest. So I think at least a 1-pager that covers some of those points demonstrates that you're serious, not just a 1-line sentence that says, I wish to apply for this grant. But that doesn't impress me if I'm reviewing it. But I don't want to read 10 pages either.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Daniele's back. Great.
I have a problem with my connections here. I have another question. What are some ways to strengthen a proposal if you have limited previous funding or results? Someone that's starting and doesn't have so many results to prove that they can do it. So if you have any tips for these people.
Okay, so
maybe we can start with James.
James, okay.
If you've not had much experience of grants, I would suggest not applying for $1 million grant, since it's going to be hard to convince people that you could. So start small, apply for a few thousands, develop a track record, show that you can do something small. Beside the application, developing relationships, networking, building up so people know who you are and have some confidence and become interested in what you're selling, that you can support, you can deliver what it is you're saying you're going to deliver. So start small and grow, network, and all the stuff we said, whatever rules there are, follow those rules to make your application. I think that would be some of the guidance I would give. Get testimonies from somebody else who believes in what you're doing. If it's the first time or you've not done much of this kind of. First time I got a grant, I got my boss to go with me to the funding institution.
I will ask this.
You should give this money because we believe that James can deliver this. I had no track record, but he had some track record. So it was useful us managing upward relations. I got him to go along with me and help me pitch over.
If I can jump in here, there are special grants from the research perspective for early career researchers. And those grants are specially designed for people who are starting out their career in research and academia. And there are even some grants for people who have switched careers, so if you were public health practitioner and you've decided that you want to do something else related to health, maybe like climate change and health, for example, there are some grants, not a lot, that can support you in making that transition. So you may actually have competence in epidemiology, but not as much competence in managing a grant for climate and health. So basically, there are grants for that. And just as James said, start small. And also, if you can build partnerships, that's another way that you can actually get some funding to do what you'd like to do. So those were, I think, are some of the ideas that I would suggest.
Do you want to step in, Laura?
I agree. And as I said, the key thing is starting small and understanding what is required so that you really deliver on those small projects. And very often it pays to work along with a more experienced partner, at this stage, so that you can learn the ropes and, build the competencies as one goes along. But there are grants that will allow for pilot projects, and so those should be explored and utilized as far as possible. And then, depending on performance, more funding could be forthcoming. Yes. So I'm in agreement.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. We are already at the end of this session, and I really love it, all this conversation. I think people already know a little bit more how to draft a proposal, and we talked about preparation, that we need time to prepare, to make sure that we address all the components on the call, on the grant call, and also all the administrative requirements to send a proposal. We also saw that for the beginners, there are some different types of grants that they can apply, and they can also, that they need to start small, and they can build partnership with people more experienced so they can get into this grant world. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. It was a very, very useful session, and I would like to invite all of you to our next session about how to write a survey for climate and health, which is a little bit a complement of this session today. And if you want a CME, the link will be shared in the chat, so you need to fill out the form. Thank you so much. Thank you, all the speakers.
Thank you as well. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. So it is right at 5 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next